This is Mike Roth. Welcome to the Open Forum in the Villages podcast. In this show, we're going to talk to leaders in the community, leaders of clubs, and interesting folks who live here in the villages to give a perspective of what's happening here in the villages and information that I think all villagers should have. We hope to add a new episode most Fridays at 9 o'clock. We are making a change soon. All of our shows will be distributed by a single podcast syndicator, Buzzsprout, both the old shows and the new show. We are also changing our subscription plans. Now you will be a supporter by simply making a subscribing via Buzzsprout. You can make a contribution of any amount that you'd like. We'd suggest $3 a month. If that's too much for your budget, you can pay less, or if you're really enjoying what we're doing and want to see us continue, you can pay more. This is going to be a subscriber-supported podcast. We are making this conversion to make it easier for everybody. And all of the subscriber-only episodes that were available on Apple Podcasts will now be converted to the Buzzsprout channel, and everyone can go ahead and listen to those. This is Mike Roth on Open Forum in the Villages. I'm here today with Alvin Stenzel. Al is a resident of the Villages, and he's an author of a recent new book. That book is called The Crystal Pond, A Young Girl's Journey Through Imagination. It's a story about the great power that almost all women have, great power or gift of imagination.
Yes, Mike, thank you for having me here today. It's a great pleasure.
Good. Al, I always like to begin the shows with a little bit of a joke, so I'll give you a little bit of a riddle. Why are penguins socially awkward?
I don't believe I know.
That's because penguins can't break the ice.
Oh, my.
Alvin, you say that your novel was written many years ago. What motivated you to write the book?
Well, Mike, I think it's a really special story how the Crystal Pond came to exist. As you just said, it was about 30 years ago that I began writing the book, and I have to give you a little bit of background. I used to walk my dogs to the end of the street every evening, and very often I would pass a house where there was a single mother and a 10-year-old daughter in the front yard, and the woman was quite attractive, and the young lady at 10 years old was doing pirouettes and grand jetés across the front yard. Obviously, she had had some training in dance. I found out later, at 10 years old, she had already had 2 years at the Washington School of Ballet, which is one of the greatest ballet schools in the country. So I would very often stop and talk to them and began to become fond of both of them. When I found out that the young lady, Kim, was playing video games, which at that time were very simplistic compared to what they are now, I asked her, would you like to teach me how to play those video games? So she and I became kind of friends, and on Saturday mornings, I would go down to their house, and she would teach me video games. I would usually be there early enough to talk to her mother for an hour or so before she got up. So they both became very important to me. So for her 11th birthday, I decided as a present I would write her a story based on the video game, and it came out quite well. I was very pleased with it. So then as Christmas came, I really had to find something special for her. And I went in a catalog, found something everyone has seen, a little crystal heart in a little pink leather pouch. And I said, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want for her. And it came, and I looked at it, and I said, this is a very intimate present for a young lady with whom I have no direct connection. So I said, all right, I will write her a story that explains how she ends up with the pink crystal. So I sat down and in 2 days wrote what became the first part of the Crystal Pond. It's a story that stands alone by itself. I don't want to give too much about the story, but a young lady, 11 years old, takes a walk in the forest near her home and meets a mysterious green man of the forest. And they spend the afternoon as he tells her about the great power of imagination that women have, and that if she concentrates on that, she can create any kind of a life that she would like. And she's fascinated by this experience and asks if this, he says that this, he does this with every young lady as she becomes a woman. And she says, well, if you do this with every woman, why have I never heard of you? And he said, well, unfortunately, the fact is that once we part, no one ever remembers that they have seen me, but their lives are different and their imagination is very different. So that is what was originally The Crystal Pond, a short story for a Christmas present for her. Then a couple months later...
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Was there actually a pond in the story?
There is actually a pond in the story. Now, it's a magical pond that she had never seen before. She knew the woods intimately.
Yes.
But came upon this pond, which was a complete surprise to begin with. And I won't describe the Green Man because that's part of the delight of that first part. So a couple months later, her birthday was coming up. And it was very easy to imagine, I need to write a sequel. So set 10 years later, with Kim at age 21, she goes back one last time to her forest to visit it, to say goodbye before she moves on to her new life. And she becomes the first young lady ever to meet the Green Man a second time. And they become very, very good friends. And I think by the time I finished that second part, I knew there were going to be 3 more parts. So in the end, The Crystal Pond is a 5-part book covering 40 periods, 40 years, with Kim at age 11, 21, 31, 41, and 51. And the story of Kim and the Green Man as they go through these years. And I don't think it's giving away too much to say that in the 3rd section, Kim has her own daughter, and there ends up a special connection also between her daughter and the Green Man. And it's fascinating to put it all together and see the underlying secrets that lie beneath the story that you do not find out until the very end, which is why I don't want to give away too much of the rest of the story.
Good. Alvin, before or during the time that you were writing the novel, what did you do for a line of work?
Well, it's very interesting to think of an author as a creative person, and my career was as a CPA, which is almost the opposite, a certified public accountant, dealing in numbers and balances and figures and concentrating very hard on orderliness. So it has been an unusual thing to be both a creative person and an organized person.
People call that the left brain and the right brain.
Correct.
Or the yin and the yang. How did you overcome your tendencies that you learned as an accountant to be a creative and be able to write a good novel?
Very interesting question. I think I was a writer before I ever thought about being an accountant. My parents told the stories of when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I was already writing short stories about animals and the holidays. And all my life, I have done a number of different things, newspaper articles, magazine articles, poetry, and I have 2 published books before The Crystal Pond, but that's this one. The Crystal Pond is the love of my life. Most important thing I think I've ever written. And what I read at one point is if someone is the imaginative, creative, head in the clouds kind of person, very often they realize they need to swing almost to the opposite side to balance themselves. So as I went through high school and college, I ended up as a mathematics major and eventually in accounting. And I had to be both organized without losing my creative juices. And I feel very fortunate that I think I've accomplished that.
Mm-hmm. Where did you grow up?
I was born in southeastern Virginia, went to university in Richmond, Virginia, lived most of my adult life in the Washington, D.C. area within a block of the White House.
And you don't have very much of a southern accent, y'all.
Well, there are stories about that. I used to spend a lot of time in northeastern North Carolina on the Outer Banks, and the language and intonation there was very different than Richmond. And every time I came back from summer vacation at the beach, everyone around me would say, "Who are you? We don't even recognize your voice anymore."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, this is a book about a young girl who turns into a woman, okay? Is there anything that would be of great interest to men in reading this book?
I think you've hit on the main point. It was written for a young lady. Over time, since it was written so long ago, I've had the opportunity to share it with dozens and dozens and dozens of people. I have amazing, wonderful reviews. They're almost all from women, but I did have one gentleman friend who read it, and his review of it for me was as strong, I think, as anybody else's. His belief was that all children could benefit from this story, but especially young ladies. And it was a wonderful experience to hear a man my own age have that same feeling, that he could understand the importance of it.
So this is a book that you wrote 30 years ago.
Approximately.
Okay. And when did you actually publish the book?
The book was published in July of 2021, so it's been out a little while, and it has been such a joy to see it in print. You can almost imagine having something that meant that much to me sitting in manuscript form for 30 years and finally decide whatever I have to do to get this published, I'm going to do it, and it has been a great joy in my life to have it to share with people.
Good. Is it self-published, or did you get it?
It's self-published with assistance from a company.
Okay. And if someone wanted to read the book, how would they purchase it?
At the moment, the best way to find it is on Amazon, like everything else, and you can look it up either by the title or by my name, Alvin Stenzel, and paperback is only $8.99, and download digital is only $2.99.
Mm-hmm. Have you any thoughts about turning it into a Audible book, which is something people just listen to?
At this time, I have done some brief thinking about it, but I have not moved in that direction yet.
Mm-hmm. My suggestion to all their authors is to turn their book into an Audible book, and if necessary, for budget reasons, read the book yourself. Create your own little studio or rent studio time, do it a chapter at a time, and create an Audible book that is listenable, because there are a lot of people who either don't want to read or don't have the time to read. Some people don't have the ability to read anymore. And if it's a good book, I think it'll get some play. Naturally, you can always hire actors or voiceover talent to do a book.
I appreciate that suggestion. If I can just take one quick second. Mm-hmm. I have read the entire book out loud myself before, and this is rather amusing. I went to a retirement home, and I read the book over 9 sessions for the residents of the retirement home.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And the ones who stayed awake really liked it. And I had one woman who was in her 80s, and she said, when I was working, I was a high school English teacher, and I would have had all my students read The Crystal Pond.
Okay, that's good. Now, The Crystal Pond is about a young girl named Kim.
Kim.
Yes, and since it was written so many years ago, maybe you can bring us up to date on Kim's story.
Oh, that's such a beautiful thing. I mean, she was a gorgeous young lady, extremely talented, and as I said, spent 10 years at the Washington School of Ballet. She learned during the middle of that part that she was too big and strong to be a ballet dancer. So she switched over to modern dance, went to 3 different summer programs, 2 at North Carolina School of the Arts and 1 at Boston Ballet. And to the great surprise of her ballet school, she was accepted into Juilliard.
Juilliard, okay.
12 girls out of the entire world in her freshman class of Juilliard. So she graduated from Juilliard, danced professionally for a number of years, mostly independently, not with a major company. But an interesting side light to the story is she went to China to help premiere a new version of the Nutcracker called the Firecracker. And in that trip, she met her future husband, who was also a dancer.
Okay.
So they ended up being married, and beautiful wedding. And now she has 2 young daughters of her own, the oldest, who is approximately the same age as she was when I wrote The Crystal Pond.
Wow. I'm sure she's got a couple of copies of The Crystal Pond to read to her child.
I made sure that she does.
Good. Good. Are you working on any other projects, Alvin?
I'd love to keep my hand in to inspire my imagination, and I've got a couple things that I've been working on. One is a very strange short story, and it's about a love affair between a mermaid and a porpoise. And I really do like it. I'm not sure what the market for it would be, but I've got that in pretty much final preparation.
I'll bet every mermaid listening will be able to buy a copy.
Well, if I did, I'd probably make at least a nickel.
Yeah.
So the other that is really...
Well, we have a lot of mermaids here in the villages. You know, they dance in the pools all the time.
I have got to talk to them. That would be such a great idea. That could become their theme book.
You could put their picture in the pool on the cover of your book. I could see that.
This is fascinating. I love this. The other thing that I worked on, I do like writing poetry. I think I've had 10 different poems in the Daily Sun over a period of time. And at one point, I was feeling a little depressed. And I said, what am I going to do to raise my spirits? So I said, let me see if I can write a poem where every word begins with the same letter. And I chose the A animal. So I wrote a poem about animals beginning with the letter A, where every word in the poem started with A, and that was inspiring. So,
can you recite the poem?
Not from memory.
Okay, well, we don't have a copy of it here. We'll skip that.
And then what I did after that, I decided, why not write a poem for every letter of the alphabet?
Oh, no, Sesame Street.
Well, better than Sesame Street. So I put together 26 poems about animals, and each poem was about animals beginning with the same letter. And then I found pictures. So the book, when you open it up, has a poem on the left side and the pictures on the right side. And if I can add one more thing that makes it really distinctive, I knew that if I was going to write 26 poems, they were all going to sound the same. So what I decided to do was look up famous poems, and each poem, I picked a famous poem and used their style and rhythm to write the poem, so nobody would ever think that I had written it. So, of course, this would be interesting for children, but for the adults reading it, they also have the game of trying to remember, now, what poem was he mimicking? So,
now, is that book in print?
The manuscript exists. I've got it in a beautiful binder. And I'm actually talking with the publisher. I did yesterday about it. She loved it. She thought it was quite fascinating and different than anything she'd ever seen. So we're kind of negotiating on how that might work out.
That's good. I hope you get it published.
I would love that.
So, sounds like a fascinating holiday gift for your sweetheart or your grandkids. How long have you lived here in the Villages?
I have been in the Villages a little over 5 years, and I absolutely love it. I've joined a number of clubs, of course, a couple writing clubs, science and technology, classical music. So I enjoy getting out and meeting people and going to these clubs. I will also add that I'm an incredible reader. This is my greatest enjoyment, is every afternoon I sit on my beautiful lanai and I read books. And in the time I've been here in the Villages, I think I'm up to 233 books that I've completed. And I write little summaries of it and keep a record of the books that I've read.
So that's the accountant creeping
That's
out.
Right. That is right.
I keep the books that I've read in a bookcase, and then when the bookcase gets full, I throw them away.
Or I give them to the library,
right,
yes.
Right. You don't throw away a book. Okay, great. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners about the book, The Crystal Pond?
Only that the reviews I've gotten are not just from average readers who I happened to know at the time or met through friends, but I had some very well-known authors and women who worked with girls who were willing to read it. My formal editor was Marcy Heidish, and a lot of people might remember that name. She wrote A Woman Called Moses, and she was the editor of the book, helped me very much to smooth it out and make it what it is today.
Maybe you have some of those reviews with you.
I do have a few.
So pick a couple of the best-known reviewers that you have of your book. Who would the first be?
All right. The first would be Marcy Heidish, who is author of A Woman Called Moses. And what she said was, The Crystal Pond is a very special, exceptional story. It has depth, colorful characters, a finely crafted plot, and the shimmer of magic that will make it appealing to children, young adults, and possibly all ages. I'm delighted and proud to recommend Mr. Stenzel's work. One other, Mary Pfeiffer, Ph.D., best-selling author of Reviving Ophelia, Saving the Selves of Adolescent Girls. And what she said was, Alvin, I can tell you are dedicated to kids. Keep up your excellent work for girls. We are kindred spirits. Let's change the world together.
Now, I don't want you to reveal much about your book, but what does selves mean in that review?
I believe in society as we see it today, still there are a lot of things that don't encourage women to believe they can do everything and anything. And Mary Pfeiffer had made it her career to give more confidence to young women to believe that they can. And to be honest, that was my initial effort in The Crystal Pond. I was not Kim's father. I became Kim's stepfather. which is the greatest part of the story. But I had to have a way to tell her things I wanted her to know as someone who was not related to her. And I felt this story was a way to inspire her and tell her what she could do with her own imagination.
Mm-hmm. How many pages is the book?
I believe the book is 168 pages. It's in short chapters, so it's very easy to read. You can pick it up in about 5-6 minutes to a chapter. I even have one person who said that's their night table book. And when they can't sleep or they wake up in the middle of the night, they just pick it up anywhere and read a chapter, and it calms them down and they go back to sleep.
A lot of books and games have an age range associated with it. How old should a granddaughter be? From what age range should they read this book, in your opinion?
Well, I find it amusing that the youngest child that has read it and talked to me about it was 10 years old. And she called it the best book I've ever read. Now, this was before Harry Potter, so I understand. And then, like I said, every age beyond that, up to the 80s, I've had representatives of those age groups. And every single woman certainly has found it inspirational, thinking about their own life, either in the past or the present. I've had at least one person say it changed their life.
Great. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners before we have to go?
No, I just appreciate this opportunity to tell more people about it. I think it's a book that's enjoyable to read, and I promise you there are underlying secrets throughout the book that you will not believe until you get to the very end, and it will be an incredibly pleasant surprise when you finish the book.
Great. Thanks very much, Alvin, for being with us today. And I hope everyone who's listening turns around and goes out and gets a copy from Amazon.
Thank you, Mike. I've enjoyed it.
We are making a change soon. All of our shows will be distributed by a single podcast syndicator, Buzzsprout, both the old shows and the new show. We are also changing our subscription plans. Now you will be a supporter by simply making a subscribing via Buzzsprout. You can make a contribution of any amount that you'd like. We'd suggest $3 a month. If that's too much for your budget, you can pay less, or if you're really enjoying what we're doing and want to see us continue, you can pay more. This is going to be a subscriber-supported podcast. We are making this conversion to make it easier for everybody. And all of the subscriber-only episodes that were available on Apple Podcasts will now be converted to the Buzzsprout channel, and everyone can go ahead and listen to those. Remember, our next episode will air live Friday at 9 a.m., or should I say pre-recorded, but that's when it'll be released on our regular subscriptions. Bonus subscribers can get early access to episodes. Should you want to become a sponsor of the show, contact me at mikeroth@rothvoice.com. If you know someone that you think should be on the show, send me an email at mike@rothvoice.com. I want to thank everyone for listening to the show. The content of the show is copyright by Roth Voice 2023, all rights reserved.